Every day is a blessing. The time we spend together. All we can do is promote change. 24 hours better.
Well, welcome back to the show. I'm going to try to start, talking a little bit louder. I don't know what's going on with my audio, but I'm just going to let you guys know right there. If I need to make some adjustments, I'll make adjustments. But today we have a guest. Okay, on top of all that, today we have a guest, and I want to talk about Mr. Jim Marshall. He is a polymathic intellectual. And from my studies and the introduction and the things that we've reached, he has over 50,000 hours. 50,000 hours. When I graduated school, they said to be a master, you have to have 10,000 hours invested in something to a key element. He has 5 times the amount of that invested in the study of practices of multiple dimensions of human potential and development. And I'm going to be just as perplexed and educated as all of you that are listening to this right now. I'm going to be just as confused. So we're going to have to dive into his mind and his brain that has all those hours dedicated to this subject. And we're going to pick his brain. We're going to try to figure it out and figure out how we can apply it. So, Mr. Jim, thank you very much for joining me today. And I'm sure if I need to bring a notebook out and take notes, because this is going to be a heavy subject here. So thank you for joining me, first of all.
Hi, Lennon. Glad to be here.
All right. So 50,000 hours. That is not something you just warm up into or something. That is something you dedicate a life to or a lifestyle to, and how it shapes you. First of all, can you break that down to me? I'm kind of a bit of a simpleton. Like, what is going on?
Well, if you do something 40 hours a week for 25 years, that's 50,000 hours.
I don't think I can think of anything that I do like that. That is dedication. I'll have to think about it, but that is dedication. Huge. Can you break down that polymathic intellectual? Like, can you break that down a little bit?
Sure. Well, a polymath is a person who is learned in multiple disparate subjects. Historical examples include Erasmus and Thomas Jefferson. My areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, military science, political science, physical culture, education, human potential, organization, and music. And I hold a Bachelor of Science cum laude from City University of New York.
All right. So I guess the first question I have is well, what are you implementing towards the human? You said the human potential and development. What are we implementing from that and gathering that information and applying that? Like, is there's something that's helping people across that path or that charter, or coming from point A to point B?
All right, let me say one sentence to sort of give some context to this so that your viewers know what we're talking about.
Please.
I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I crafted a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. And more directly to the question you just asked, I worked for 40 years as a human development engineer, where I brought engineering practices, engineering devices, techniques, strategies, procedures to human development. So all of my clients attain higher levels of equanimity, responsibility, mental clarity, spirituality, ethics, whatever the person wanted. And it was done on an engineering basis. It was not counseling. And that led me to discovering the data, which is today ensconced in Septemics.
So, as an instructional designer, that's the field that I currently work in. I always have a eureka moment. when there's a situation where we're coaching someone or they're teaching something or they're learning a different way of seeing things, and there's that moment of eureka when it snaps and it connects in their brain. Is there a way that you have that it quantifies to you, that it just pops up, or you can see that demonstration of when that light bulb cuts on and that switch? Is there something that happens in that process?
Well, let me answer this way. What you call the eureka moment is the whole point of my life. So I have had tens of thousands of eureka moments. And that is what I brought to my clients. So a guy comes into me and he says, Jim, I have a drinking problem. Can you help me? I say, sure. And we get into it. And 10 minutes later he says, wait, I just realized, I don't need to drink anymore. That's a eureka moment. That is what I did for my clients for 40 years. So there were thousands and thousands and thousands of them with my clients because that was my stock and trade. And I did the same thing on myself because I meditated on a daily basis for 40 years. And the meditation advanced geometrically, or you might say exponentially,
Right.
so that later on in the game, I would accomplish as much in 10 minutes as it would have taken me a week 20 years earlier. So it's all about realization, insight, cognition, whatever you want to call it.
Is there
That is
something
my
that
life.
No, no, no. It's I'm trying to dig a little deeper. Is there something that happened, either that eureka moment that happened to you, or that happened to one of your clients that changed the perspective and how you prosper through or find new ways to do it? Is there something that changed from beginning to the starting point, or I guess that sparked a little bit more?
There have been many thousands of these uh, in my life and in my clients. I started school at the age of 3, and I've been involved in education my entire life to this present day. And I would sit in school and my mind would just open up. And I would have these insights, big insights into things in the classroom. And then when I got into meditation, it just took off like a rocket ship. So in my case, we're not talking about specific ones. We're talking about maybe between me and my clients, something like 40, 50,000 eureka moments over the course of my life.
All right. Is there a particular one that kind of like started up or got you to that point? Is there something that resonates harder than the rest of them? For me
Well,
personally, I've had the story of like my greatest failure, and I talk about that because it actually inspired me to learn like my limits and what my limits were and how I was able to push forward that because I was unaware of what my limits were in the beginning, you know?
right,
So that was like the thing that just drove me from there on. Is there a
right.
moment that happened to you?
Well, if you were one of my clients, you would experience something like that about every 15 or 20 minutes for as long as we worked together. And that's how I discovered septemics. Let me explain the background because this is an unusual story.
Sure.
The path to septemics really began when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, at the time, I thought I was going to be engineering physical things such as airfoils and motors and electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me I wanted to engineer the human psyche because it is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the husband, don't understand the child, don't understand the mother. This is a huge problem that everybody has, and I have solved that problem with septemics. Because if you get the book and study it, you'll see it is a fruitful source of epiphanies. Uh, if you use it as intended, you will be in a constant state of saying, oh, now I understand why I couldn't get along with Joe in 1993. Oh, that's why my parents can't get together. Oh, that's why Fred and Ethel are not staying together in their mouth. That just goes on continuously if you use this book. It's designed to do that, and it doesn't. And some version of this book has existed for over 30 years, and I've been watching people do this for 30 years. They say, wow. They come to me and say, Jim, this is blowing my mind. I say, I know. So look, I had a long career as human development engineer, and all of my clients improved as a result of our work together. But incidentally, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told that to anyone, but I made notes for 40 years. And it became obvious to me over a period of time that the client would be at a specific level, on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. There is no theory of subtemics. This is all based on direct empirical observation. So by 1995, I had 32 scales that I had simply observed thousands and thousands and thousands of times, because you have to realize that in the course of these sessions, there are maybe, 8,000, 9,000 times when a client would be at a specific level and we'd work and he'd go up to the next level. And and he didn't know anything about it. And so he would get there and I would, think to myself, well, that verifies my hypothesis because it just worked again. And then, of course, I would leave the session and go to maybe Walmart and be standing in line and I'd watch two ladies and I'd see exactly the same phenomena. And people I don't even know. It's there. If you know what it is, it's there. So by 1995, I had these 32 scales, and I was pondering one day a difficult client. Now, I had a 6-level scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct. And I was trying to find this client on this scale. In other words, what level is she at? And I couldn't get an answer. Then I realized, wait a minute, this scale has a 7th level. I had never seen that phenomenon before, so therefore it wasn't in the scale. And there's a very specific technical reason for that, which I could explain to you, why I had never seen it before. Anyway, as soon as I saw what this phenomenon was, I understood the client perfectly, both retroactively and going forward. But more importantly, I knew where to insert it into the 6-level scale. That was obvious to me. And when I inserted it at that moment, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data relevant to the scale. All of these interlocking, intersecting, interacting mathematical phenomena jumped out at me. And I looked at the thing and I said, wow, this thing has got math in it. Now, I have to tell you, I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it. So I think in math. When it appears, I recognize it. And that's not unusual to me. Anybody in the science, engineering, and math world, that's how we are. When we see things going on in the real world, we see formulae. We know what formula to connect that with. And when I was really a math whiz. I'd look at the problem and I'd go, I know how to solve it. 3 seconds. And then I would take time writing it out in order to convince the teacher that I knew how to do it. So I saw that. I said, whoa, whatever the hell this thing is, it has to be natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law. Like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence. So my next thought was, I wonder how many of these other scales I have might be 7-level scales that hadn't been developed all the way, like this one. Because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So now, knowing what I was looking for, I studied all these other scales, and in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I have 32 7-level scales, each corresponding to a different area of human phenomena that all had math embedded in them. Having gone to school for 28 years, I said to myself, I never saw anything like this. This looks like a new subject to me. And my next thought was, wait a minute, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I were to put this in a book and get it out so people could have it and use it. So I'm going to have to write a book. The first draft was finished in December of 95. And I immediately sent it out upon completion to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They must have been blown away by it because it only took a few days for them to get back to me and say, yeah, I get it. This is great. They had differing responses, but distinctly positive responses. And that told me that this was exactly what I thought it was, which is a new subject that people would get. I then spent the next 25 years of my life writing the book because you have to realize first I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much already told you how that occurred. Although you have to realize I did find three more skills as I was doing the writing, which I incorporated in. Then I had to take that data and use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now we're getting into engineering. In the world of engineering, you are never allowed to say, whoops. You can't just have the airplane fall out of the sky and say, whoops, I didn't get that one right. Or have the bridge fall into the river. Well, sorry. That's not allowed in engineering. It's rigorous. It's full of factors of error, margins for error, so that does not happen. So in engineering, opinion and belief is completely ignored and unwelcome. Of course, that's not true in the rest of my life, like with my family, but in engineering, that's how it is. So I had to craft something that would work all the time for every person who could read English. That took 20 years. But the most time-consuming aspect of creating this was writing it in a way that would make sense to the average reader of English. Now, you have to realize that most scientists who discover these things, they don't have that hurdle. For example, when Einstein released his theory of relativity, the first one in 1905, second one in 1915, he was writing for mathematicians and physicists, period. He made no attempt to communicate to the average reader. But that was what I wanted to do because from day one, my intent was to help the people of Earth with this. So I had to be able to communicate this to somebody who had never even been to college. So I know I succeeded at that because it's been over 30 years since the first version came out, and people get it. They get it. Somebody is in a bookstore, right? And he sees this book, Septemics. What the hell is this? He takes it down, he opens it up. Doesn't matter what chapter he looks at. He looks at it, first page of the chapter, and he says, oh, this makes sense. That is what people say about this. Then after they work with it for a while and use it and they see how it works in their life, with their significant others and their employee, then it becomes, wow, this is big. That's what they tell me. I have people all over the world who are now septemicists using this, and that's what they say. They contact me, Jim, this is blowing my mind. Well, I already know that. So, and the reason it's blowing their mind is this is an entirely new subject based entirely on natural law. Now, let's talk about natural law. Can you remember the first time you saw the Pythagorean theorem? You were maybe 12 or 13 or 14 in math.
I don't remember it exactly.
Okay, a squared plus b squared equals c squared in a right triangle, right?
Yeah, don't remember when I saw it, but
Okay, I'm not asking for a date, but there was a time when you first saw it. Didn't take long for you to get it. You don't have to be a genius to understand it. You had to be a genius to figure it out. Pythagoras, he figured this out 2,600 years ago and wrote it down and gave it to us. That's why it bears his name. So, and the reason you get it is it's natural law. Now, I can tell you, having studied a lot of physics, that the Newton's three laws of motion, Newton is the father of physics, To physicists, they're so basic, they're like irrefutable, they're like common sense. It's like physicists will say, well, duh, what else would it be? But how come nobody figured out until Newton did 400 years ago? He was a 25-year-old math genius. And you may know the famous story about him seeing the apple fall from the tree. And when it did, he had a realization that that was the same force that held the moon around the earth. And that's where the three laws of motion came from, that epiphany. And then he created calculus so we could use it. Well, rocket scientists and astrophysicists are still using it. They're still using calculus and they're still using the three laws of motion because it's inarguable. It's natural law. Now, you could say it different ways. And I would say, as far as my book, I could see people quibbling with the words that I chose because all of these things have to be described somehow. You have to pick a word. So I could see somebody saying, well, why did you call it this? Why didn't you call it that? And there's actually a lot of discussion in the book about that, why I called it that. And there's also a lot of synonym studies. Each of the scales has a synonym name. In other words, you could call it this, but you could also call it this. And then it has 7 levels, and each of the level has a name, and each of those levels has a synonym. So in other words, I'm sort of going along with this idea, okay, we could say this in more than one way. And that's true for all of mathematics. It's true for all of science. You could have very often, like, for example, the holy grail of geometry is proving something. They give you something and they say, prove it. Well, you'll have 10 guys and they'll have different versions of the proof. This guy does A, B, C, D, and this guy does B, D, A, E, but they get it right. So in other words, there are different ways to express these things. And I spent years expressing this in a way that would make sense to Leland Sellers.
Hey, I'm going to thank you for that when I read it because I'm sure that I'm going to have a couple of issues.
And just to clarify that, there is a glossary, not only in front of each chapter, even in front of the introduction, there's a glossary. And the readers all tell me, boy, the glossary really helped me. Well, of course, I knew that when I was doing all the work of creating the glossary, giving specific definitions of every one of these words. The name of the scale has a definition. The name of each level has a definition. What I should do now, because it's getting a little vague, is to tell you the names of the scales so you'll know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book.
Okay.
So there are 35 scales, and of the 35 scales, 24 of them are individual scales and 11 of them are group scales. These are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself is a life-changing experience because I'm giving you data you didn't have before. So let me give you an example of how this works. So I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is his motivation. Why is this person doing this? Right? That's his motivation. So you could take the scale of motivation and you could ask, well, What's my mother's motivation toward me? What's my father's motivation toward me? What's my girlfriend's motivation toward me? What's my pastor's motivation toward me? And you could do this for every person you know or have ever known, which is going to be hundreds of people. And then you could reverse the vector and say, what's my motivation toward Joe? What's my motivation toward my cousin? What's my motivation toward Aunt Agnes, and so forth? And get another several hundred insights. Now, every time you get a correct answer, you necessarily have an insight. We're back to what you were talking about earlier. That is what this is about. It's designed to give you an insight. So you say, gee, I wonder where my wife is on the scale of basic purposes. Well, you know her, and the material is very specific. So when you read it, you're going to say, oh, I see. She's at level 4. That explains A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K about her. And you'll continue to have insights about her for days or weeks as a result of this one thing. Because you'll say, 2 weeks later, you say, oh, now I understand why she said that when we were at Joe's party. Because she's at this level on this scale. So let's say you're dating a girl for 3 months and you're thinking about getting married, right? Wouldn't it be sensible to say, why does this woman want to marry me? I mean, doesn't that make sense to inquire that way? I'm not saying ask the girl. Just look in the book. There's only 7 levels. It's not a hard choice. You know her well. And there's only 7 choices, and they're specific. So when you look at it, you're going to get it. You're going to say, oh, I see. She wants to marry me because she's at level 1, motivation level 1, which is love, the highest motivation of all. So let's set the date. And maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe what happens is you say, now that I've thought about this, now I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I have a 60-foot yacht, I fly my own Learjet, I live in a $15 million condo, and have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation. That's level 4, money. Now, what you do with that is entirely up to you. That's got nothing to do with me. You might say, well, this is not the first woman who wanted to marry me for my money, but this one is beautiful, smart, funny, congenial, glamorous, graceful. So I'm going to marry her anyway. And you might live happily ever after, even with that motive that she has, because you know what it is. But maybe you're the type of guy who says, I don't want to marry somebody who wants to marry me for my money. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself. And you break up. Now, in that case, don't think you're going to be upset. You will not. You'll be relieved. You'll say, thank God I figured this out now before I wind up owing her $15,000 a month in alimony. See? And now when you go forward, you're a little bit smarter. Maybe you don't even mention the Maserati when you meet a girl. So this is how this works. It enables you to make wise choices, and every time you use it, you get smarter. Now, because it makes you smarter, that in itself makes it easier to use because you're now smarter. And because you use it more, you get smarter, and then you use it more. So this is a virtuous cycle. So if you live 1,000 years, you will still be using this book because you're going to meet new people and there's going to be new situations coming up. And when something comes up, let's say 500 years from now, some guy wants to go into business with you. You say, let me see where this guy is on this scale. You open up the door. Oh, yeah, I see he's on that level. That's not so good. I'm not going into business with this guy. So you just saved yourself a lot of aggravation by doing that. That's how this works.
So with all of that being said, I asked the question, what keeps you motivated? If it seems like you found the key to the matrix and you're seeing things that as they're happening, and everything that's transpiring. But so what keeps you motivated? What keeps you going in this field and level of expectation?
When you say in this field, do you mean systemics?
Yes.
Because of course there are many, like everyone, I have many motivations and many goals and many things that keep me going. So basically, this book is a gift to people of Earth. This works. It helps people. People have been telling me for 30 years they get it and it works. I get this every day from people all over the world. And so I want them to have it because I want them to lead better lives. So my motto, maybe this will answer your question, is your success is my reward.
All right. So, can you tell everybody where to find this book? How can they get in touch with you? And if they want to reach out for a conversation, where can they locate you?
Okay, well, I would invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, SEPTEMICS, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a pre-recorded audio called Introduction to Septemics that you can listen to that explains it in 15 minutes. If you do all of that, you're probably going to want to buy the book because it's available hardbound, softbound, and ebook. Ebooks are cheap.
Right.
With $10, you download it in 3 minutes, you have it. And then you're off to changing your whole life. Because this works. It's very specific. And I could give you an unlimited amount of examples of how this works and how quick and effective this is because it's natural law. If you came to me and said, I have a garden and it's 4 yards on one side and 3 yards on the other side, would you go out and measure for me how long the diagonal will be? Because I want to put bricks down to have it make a path. I'd say, wait, I don't need to measure anything. I know the Pythagorean theorem. If one side is 3 yards and the other side is 4 yards, the diagonal is 5 yards. It's not necessary for me to measure it. I already know. That's what this is like.
All right. Well, Mr. Marshall, I'm going to have to do some homework now and download your book, take a glance at it, read over some things, and see if I can make some changes, and then try to have you back and discuss, my findings and my honesty, like just asking a subject matter expert as yourself about what happened. I hope you're game for that, and I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm probably sure I'm going to do it now. So hopefully I get to have you back, and we can discuss that situation a little bit, the things in my findings, and all the interactions, and praise you for your hard work for the last 50,000 hours of hard work. So I hope you will accept that when that comes through, and I would love to have you back on at some point.
Okay, great.
All right. So everyone, this is Mr. Marshall, and I'm sure we can dive way more into this, and we're probably going to. So at some point in time, we're going to take care of that. Thank you for your time, and I will reach back out to you shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Leland. Have a nice day.
Listen, if this message resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Transformation doesn't happen from watching. It happens from action. If you're ready to level up your mindset, your habits, and your life, I've created something for you. Tap the link below and join my free podcast and community where growth isn't just talked about, it's lived. Surround yourself with people who are building, evolving, and pushing forward. And if you haven't already, subscribe, stay connected, and commit to becoming the strongest version of yourself. This is your moment. Let's grow.
Every day is a blessing. The time we spend together. All we can do is promote change. 24 hours better.